Okay, folks, here we are in beautiful Northwest Georgia. Northwest Georgia. What an interesting fireplace we have here. We'll be focusing in closer here. But I want to introduce you to someone that has made it possible for us to be here to share this with you. One of those fantastic artifacts that is strewn about our country that many people overlook, but that are simply rewarding in the history of our great nation. I want to introduce you, if I may, to Miss Jerry Allison. It's a pleasure
Hello.
having you,
It's nice.
allowing us to come
It's
and
nice
see.
meeting you, Dr. Murray.
And I'm going to say Marie. Marie,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, Marie is one that called this to our attention, and that's how we find many of these things, is by you folks that watch, calling these to our attention whereby they can be shared. Jerry, tell me a little bit about how old approximately is this chimney, and can you give me just a little history on it?
Well, Dr. Murray, I really don't know, except this was built during the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother-in-law, father-in-law bought this property back in 1963 or 64.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this was an old log house. They tore the house down and left the chimney. The chimney was built by slaves.
Well,
So that's, I imagine that was what, during the 1800s?
back in the
Yeah,
1800s then. Uh-huh.
And so not very long ago, I had the house painted, and the chimney was covered in this. What is that? I don't know
Tina,
what.
there was
Yes.
moss
And
what-
you, and of course, I had the people that was painting the house to clean the chimney. And I was sitting out here one day, Maria and I was, and we looked and we noticed all this writing on the chimney. It was cleaned with, of course, with lye or something like that. And so that's when Marie got in touch with you.
Well,
and took
fantastic.
pictures.
Marie, we thank you for doing that. And when you first saw it, were you curious to what came to your mind?
Immediately after watching so many of your documentaries, of course, just the straight lines, I said, oh, that's ogham of some kind. I had no idea. And she said, well, it's not. I said, I know it is. And I said, I'm going to write Dr. Murray and send pictures of it and see if
Well,
he can
that you
tell us.
certainly
It
did.
really fascinated me.
Well,
Because I
great.
watched so many documentaries of yours.
Wow.
I knew it was something.
Well, great. Now we're going to zoom in. Again, thank you so much.
Oh,
Do you
you're
have
so
something
welcome.
else you'd like to share with us?
No, I think that's about all. I haven't been down here but about 6 years, and of course, Marie knows more about the history of Rising Fawn than I do.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much.
Okay.
We're going to focus in on the stone here now.
Okay, Dr. Murray.
Thank you. This is one of the most unusual stones. Now, you must remember this was no doubt at one time one solid slab. And this one solid slab has been cut up into blocks. And therefore, probably the overall message will no doubt perhaps is lost. But the idea is, who did it? I can see signs that could be some ancient Greek here, and it's an interesting thing. One of the things when I first received the pictures, and we'll have a focus in on this, which it's probably not English, but there's a perfect YH here, just in English. Now, out of all the writings, that would be very curious, but it is almost like a signature here on the stone. Now, as we sweep this stone, as you can see, there are markings on almost every stone. So I'm going to have the camera move in and do some close-ups, whereby you are going to have a chance, an opportunity to observe some of this yourself. Now, there is no stem line, and they were carved. They were carved not by percussion, but it would seem by a sharp object. Now, inasmuch as this was cleaned very recently with acid, you're going to see that some of the stones did not purge as well as others. And the ones that the acid really affected even look almost new. But that's what acid does. And of course, had it not been for the acid, I want to say for those critics, we would have never found the marks in the first place. So there they are, call to our attention. We're going to move in and do some close-ups now.
While the markings on these stones are interesting and unusual, there is not sufficient evidence for Shepherd's Chapel Network broadcasting to interpret the markings. We would welcome comments and input from stonemasons or others with experience in construction with stone if they have any knowledge concerning what these markings might indicate. SCN leaves any interpretation of these markings to the viewer.
All right, Jerry, it's not unusual for old Southern homes to have their own cemeteries,
In the
is it?
yards.
Right.
No.
And that's what we have here? Could
Yes.
you tell us a little about it?
Well, I think there's 3 or 4 slaves buried here, and then we have a little girl over here with her name on this tombstone that says Barbara Ann Cordell. And of course, they said that she died from some kind of fever years ago.
Well,
But there's several little tombstones in here, and of course, I don't know who's buried here, except they had told me several slaves were buried here, and this little girl.
well, I noticed some markings on one stone over here that is a headstone, and it is rather ancient right here. But evidently there was a great deal of chiseled writings, not chiseled, but rubbed markings on this hill, or where these stones came from. Now we're going to step outside, and I want to show you some stones that Jerry has gathered up that very definitely have further markings on them. Jerry, you have the place looking real nice.
Thanks.
And it's...
This hedge was all grown up over the cemetery, and I had it cleaned off.
Well, I think
There was
that's...
an old wire fence around here, and you couldn't even get in here.
Well, that's great. It looks real nice now, and you've done a good job with it. Okay, we're going to walk over, and Jerry has gathered these. Now you'll note that I'm going to turn this stone just a little bit. I'll tell you, you want to say Ogham when you first see it. But actually, and it's not as well on this as it is lower, we see on this bottom stone here the same markings that you have on the chimney. So no doubt some good stonemason has taken a slab and has made these particular stones from it for building. What it would have been like to have seen that entire slab before it was cut into stones. But we'll keep working with it, and who knows? As we always teach, stones speak. There's a message there, and we'll work till we find it. We certainly want to thank Jerry for being your hospitality and allowing us to share this with others. We just thank you so much for that.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. All right, we continue here in Georgia, northwest Georgia, and we are at a mound site. We're about 70 miles from Etowah. You'll remember the documentary we did there with the huge mounds. And what a beautiful area we're in at this time. It's no wonder that we find so many points and things of that nature in this area, because no doubt the hunting and everything was so very well. But it gives me pleasure to introduce to you someone that was present when digs took place at these particular mounds that we're standing on, and we'll be sharing some of the artifacts, but I just want you to hear from an eyewitness, his description perhaps of the dig and of what was before some of this got mislaid just a little bit, we'll say. So, Ken Pennington, bless you. It's good to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Share with us, if you would, your dig here and the name of the mounds, and just fill us in, if you would.
Okay, now I'll try to do this. The things that actually happen and the way I remember them don't always work out. So, but the mounds were known to the early Cherokees that moved into this area, but they couldn't tell who had constructed them. So when the first Europeans or white settlers moved into the area, they asked the Cherokee Indians that was living here about the mounds, and they said they had no idea who built them. So the mounds were known for at least 150 years. I think the house that's just up on the hill behind the camera there was constructed in 1835, and this was a part of the Cherokee Nation until about 1838-39. Anyway, the mounds was known, and over the years different local people would come and dig into them trying to recover lost Indian treasures. In the early 1970s, I had the chance to become well acquainted with a young amateur archaeologist that was very knowledgeable about the history of the Indians in this area as well as in the Ohio River Valley. And when I described the kinds of mounds that were known to exist here on this hill behind us, or this little rise, he said that he thought that those sounded like part of the Hopewell Adena type culture that's basically in the Ohio River Valley and up in Illinois. So he asked me could I show him the mounds, and we could try at least to determine if they were worth looking into. Maybe they would be Hopewellian mounds. So I brought him down here and we looked, and he agreed that probably they were of Hopewell Adena origin, and so we thought we would try to maybe dig into them at some point and see what kind of material would be found in them. So the owner of the property, Mr. James C. Weiss, graciously gave us permission to come down and do a test excavation. But one of the young men that was with us had some friends that were local pot hunters, and before we could get our plans organized and get started on our initial investigation, he had told his friends that Mr. Weiss had given us permission, and so his friends came down the very next weekend and dug into the base of what later was named Mound C, which I would be standing just at the outer or southwest edge of. And they immediately, once they got down into the core at the edge of this mound, immediately started finding superb artifacts that well represented the Hopewell culture. They found a copper pan pipe, a copper ear spool, several beads, and other artifacts that were typical Hopewellian artifacts. So these guys just couldn't contain themselves. They began to brag to their friends about the artifacts that they had found, and we heard about this, and we contacted them and asked them to stop, and we tried to tell them the importance of preserving this mound until one of the universities could come in and do a professional type dig. So then we contacted a couple of friends of ours that we were acquainted with that we considered professional archaeologists, the state archaeologist with Tennessee, and Mr. Pat Garrow, who was then at Shorter College down in Rome, Georgia. And so they came up and looked at the mounds and agreed with us that these need to be preserved, and let's get one of the universities involved. So another local friend of ours that lives just on Lookout Mountain to our left here was very interested in the archaeology of this area, and he was also acquainted with several very wealthy families on Lookout Mountain. He made 2 or 3 phone calls and raised, I believe, $10,000 to initiate this project. And we got the University of Georgia involved, and they sent a group up one summer. I think it was the summer of 1973. And we also got Covenant College, which is located up on top of the mountain here. Covenant provided room and board for the University of Georgia students. And anyway, they came in June of 1973 and made an initial study, and then immediately after that started the excavation of the mounds, which are known or became known as the Tunacunnhee Mounds, because somewhere many years ago I had read early archaeological report that stated that the Indians that were living in the area, the Cherokees especially, had called the creek that's just to our right here down the slope the Tunacunnhee Creek. So I figured that might be our last chance to have something named that would indicate what the creek had originally been called. So I suggested let's name them Tunacunnhee in honor of the Cherokee designation for the creek. So they became known as the Tunacunnhee Mounds. The University of Georgia came up, staked the site off, did all their measurements, and immediately began the excavation of the mounds. Okay, then let me briefly give a description of the valley where we're standing. To our immediate left, within a half a mile, is the foot of Lookout Mountain, and Lookout Mountain rises abruptly, and there's just a big wall with the cliffs along the top. And unfortunately, you can't see that today because there's the fog up there. You remember the famous Civil War battle, the battle above the clouds. Well, it happened on a day similar to this. Probably if you drive through that fog to the top of the mountain now, it will be clear, just like it is here. But anyway, this village site and mound site is located in a beautiful valley along the banks of the Lookout Creek, or the Tunacunnhee as the Indians called it. The Cherokee moved into the area when the white settlers kept pushing them down from Virginia and eastern Tennessee and North Carolina, and they moved into the area. And then as they were pushed out, the early white settlers came in, and again the house behind us, built in 1835, I believe, by slave labor, and it was one of the earliest farms and a plantation here. In the field that's immediately behind the camera was the village site, and I think the carbon datings of the village site probably indicated it was there around 150 AD. On down at the between the village site and the creek, it was a mound made basically of clay, and probably served as some kind of temple platform, or maybe the home of one of their chiefs or priests or leaders here, although I'm not sure that the Hopewell people had that kind of structure or did that kind of construction for these chief structures or the priest. The mounds were all located here on the hill, and it seems that the type artifacts that were found here were basically the type that's prominent in all or most of the Hopewell Indian sites that I mentioned earlier, based in the Ohio River Valley and up in Illinois, and there have been mounds found all over the southeast, but this particular mound had several artifacts that would show that whoever was buried here was well thought of. None of these types of artifacts were found in the village site, and the types of artifacts that were found in the village site were not located in the mound in great numbers. Very few, if any, at all. But anyway, the reason that these people selected this area as a site may have been that it was along major trade routes. There was a trail that passed through this area, or a trace as the early people call it, the Great Indian Warpath or War Trace, and it passed north and south through this valley. And then there was another trail that passed within just a couple of miles or 3 miles of the area that came from the large Indian towns along the Tennessee River at Nickajack, Long Island, Running Water, and crossed over the mountain and went over into Georgia and on down along into South Carolina and to the coast near Savannah or Charleston, I suppose. But they think that the Indians selected this site because it may have been, or probably selected because it was situated along these major trade routes. There's also a good deposit of hematite in the ridges, the low ridges in this valley, and hematite was one of the materials that these people, for some reason or other, considered pretty valuable. And you'll find it in a lot of their village sites, in a lot of their burials. They would be included as grave offerings. And I'm not sure what the purpose of the hematite was, but it had some real significance to them. So maybe they set up a village here, or a headquarters, to kind of keep this trade route going and to gather some of the local materials, natural materials.
About how far are we from? I've been we've done a documentary at the Bat Creek Mounds, and it seems I see a similarity as far as height, like you described, about 5 or 6 feet. About how far are we from Loudoun County, Tennessee?
I'd say Loudoun, probably around 70 to 80 miles. I'm not sure about that, but it would be somewhere close to that. And if I hesitate occasionally, it's because I'm having to think about what I think you would be interested in knowing about these sites. But since we mentioned the mounds, I think there was probably 7 or 8 mounds here. I don't remember at this time. It's been 20 years or more. The largest mound was what later became known as Mound A. It was about 50 feet in diameter, maybe 5 or 6 feet high, the best I can remember, and it was made of these limestone rocks that you can see here at my feet and in this area. And these were originally part of the mound. The second and most important mound was Mound C, that was located immediately behind me here. It was approximately 30 feet in diameter, maybe 4 feet high, 4 or 5 feet high, and it was in the base of this mound that the first artifacts were found. The earlier farmers had told me probably 25, 30 years ago that when they would plow this area, when the early settlers plowed this area, they would plow up copper. Well, I took that with a grain of salt. I thought, well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But once my friend told me that copper was one of the major things that these Hopewell people had, then I remembered them telling me the copper had been plowed up here, and that was a hint that this may have been indeed a Hopewell site. But one of the major artifacts that were found in these mounds, well, let me back up just a minute. I believe there was like 30-something burials, maybe 35, 36, at least parts or most of the skeleton material from human burials that had been interred in these mounds were found, and with most of them there was different associations or different artifacts in association with them that probably they thought they were going to take to the next world. Probably the most important artifact that was found at this site was what is known as a pan pipe. Now, I'm not sure I know, or anyone ever told me what these pan pipes were used for, but pan pipe, as far as I know, is like the little series of flutes that this little hoof guy is supposed to run around chasing women through the forest. And I remember in these pictures or paintings they're playing these little musical instruments, and those are pan pipes. And these pipes were probably most of them were 3 different cane reeds of different lengths, and then they would have sheet copper hammered around them or embossed around them. And I think there was 9 complete or 9 identifiable pan pipes found here, most of them in excellent condition. Some of them had silver hammered around them, and there was a fragment of what possibly was a 10th pan pipe. And in all of North America, I believe a third of the pan pipes ever found were found in 3 sites. These 3 sites put together. There, I think 2 other mounds, one in maybe Ohio and one in Illinois, had 9 pound pipes. So this had 9 pound pipes also found here, and that's at least, I believe they said, a third of all the pan pipes that's ever been found. So this was evidently an important site. Of course, there was ear spools, copper ear spools, shark's teeth from maybe the Gulf Coast, shark's vertebra. There was at least a piece of obsidian found by one of the earlier pod hunters, and the things that are mentioned in the archaeological report are not a part of the things that the pod hunters found. So if the things that the pod hunters had found over the years could be returned, and then this probably would have had more pan pipes than the other sites we mentioned earlier. But there, see, besides the shark's teeth, there was turtle shell rattles, flint points. So some of the flint positively coming from the Ohio River Valley. There was one item of stone that had to come from Yosemite or somewhere in that area, at least somewhere west of the Mississippi River. And Yosemite, I think, was the possibility that was mentioned by the archaeologist. So this was part of a vast, or at least located on the trails, that was a part of a vast trade system.
When you mention the word trace and you think of the migrations that took place in this nation long before Europeans supposedly set foot here, let's put it that way, it's amazing, and they always use that one thing that's so important to man: water and also game. And certainly it seems that this part of Georgia is especially rich in game and even agriculture to this day. And we'll pan where that city was situated there. We're panning now. We're going to pan down where the community was. And Ken, you're familiar with that. As he pans on down into that valley where those cattle are, explain what you know about the city that was there.
Okay, I think it probably should be termed more of a village, but in this village there was over the years several arrowheads or projectile points. I'm not sure in fact I'm sure they weren't arrowheads. Most of them would be knives and spear tips, but there were several found in the area. As he pans around, you can see the cattle in that area especially. There was a lot of clear quartz points found that were made from quartz crystals, clear quartz crystals, and some milk quartz. And this was a field that was kind of famous with the local people that liked to pick up arrowheads. When I was in high school, I'd ride the school bus over here, even though I lived several miles out on top of Lookout Mountain. I would ride the school bus to this point and get off and hunt arrowheads till dark, and never gave these mounds much thought at that time. But the village site there was determined to be here approximately the same time as the mound site, so they believed that that's was the village, and they did just a small excavation there because they were basically trying to excavate these mounds and protect what was here from the local pot hunters that was more than anxious to come back in as soon as the University of Georgia finished. The artifacts found there were typical woodland type artifacts, projectile points, and all of them being basically the same shape and basically the same size. There was the little pottery vessels that had the 3 legs on the bottom. I think they're like a conical pot with 3 little knobs or legs on the bottom that would help them stand. And again, on down toward the creek, there was the mound that probably some kind of a structure was built on for either ceremonial purposes or possibly the house of the head man or chief of this little village. In the hills, in the ridges, there's a lot of limestone deposits, a lot of caves, and a lot of these caves also contain skeleton material of burials. Several of the caves would have as many as 30 or 40 individuals that had been laid in them or dropped in them or buried. Most of them are pits. You have to get a rope and rappel in, and yet these people are laid down there, so somehow they would get down into these deep pits. And on the ridges that he's panning around that you see around us, there's other mounds. Some have been excavated into by the pot hunters. I don't think any of them have been dug into by the universities as of yet, and hopefully it won't be too late when they decide to come in and dig those.
And I asked if you could share with us one of the flutes, if you could show us and explain one of the pan flutes to us when we get down to the museum where it's kept there.
Yeah, sure can.
Well, fantastic. Ken, thank you. You know, it's rare that we find an eyewitness to the dig, and it means a lot to us and for you sharing this time with us and these things. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
While we were out in the field, we're back in a little city here, and Ken had mentioned that he was an artist. Well, you know, we hear people at times that say they are an artist. Hey, he is an artist. I want to share with you, if I may, inasmuch as he grew up in this part of the country, right here in the Cherokee Nation, practically, that's is to say in its original area. This is one of Ken's works here. I'm going to let Ken step in and point out to you what is in this painting and give us an in-depth look into it. Ken, if you would, please.
Okay, I thank you very much. Since I had studied the Indian cultures of this area for so many years, I thought I'd try to put some of that back and share what I think I have learned with the general public. Because I had hunted these Indian villages and studied Indians for so long, I thought I would show some of the different kinds of artifacts and pottery and weapons and ornaments that they had. In this particular painting, which I happen to have on my wall here in the office this morning, anyway, this is a painting I did in 1988, and I wanted to show a Cherokee. Well, actually, my original thought was to do a series of the Indians of the Southeast with some of the birds and animals that are now endangered or extinct. In this case, I chose to paint a Cherokee warrior, and I tried to date him about the mid-1700s by showing him with a headdress that's a white-tailed deer's tail on top of his head, and that's one of the manners of dress that wasn't real common with the Cherokees. But by this, I wanted to show that he was a part of the Iroquois Confederacy, which they originally were part of the Iroquois people, and they kept being pushed south into the southern Appalachians, and they traditionally claimed the Delaware as their grandfathers, and the Delaware, as you probably know, is still considered part of the Iroquois Confederacy. The little birds you probably find a little unusual, but that's the Carolina parakeet, and the Carolina parakeet was the only parrot ever native to North America. I mean, they were here just like little bluebirds. They probably never numbered just a few thousand or several thousand, but probably never numbered much more than that. The early farmers considered the little parakeets a nuisance because they preferred fruit and seeds as their diet, and they would get into the farmers' fruit crops and destroy them. So the farmers began to kill the little parakeets. And one of the unfortunate habits of these parakeets was, instead of fleeing when they were faced with danger, if one was killed or wounded, the rest would hover nearby, chattering noisily, and a man could take a shotgun and kill the entire flock. And after flock was decimated, then the natural enemies added to that eventually led to the extinction of the little Carolina parakeet. They were tolerant of cold weather and covered the southeast United States and were seen as far west as Colorado and across southern Indiana. I went to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City and made notes and drawings and photographs of their mounted specimens, and also I did the same thing at Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. So they are authentic, or were authentic little birds native to the southeastern United States. The ornament that he has here is a shell gorget made of marine conch shell that would be found along the ocean or the Gulf Coast. It's the large outer wall, and they would carve these into disc and incise elaborate designs on the inside. This particular design is a rattlesnake. It's kind of a complicated design, but it is a rattlesnake, and these gorgets have been found, several hundred of them, across the southeastern United States, and was part of the things that you would find in the Mississippian period or Mississippian cultures of that time. And basically all of them have the same design. The beads are also of marine conch. I included 4 glass beads that you can see, blue and one red one here, so that I could at least date him like the early 1700s or mid 1700s. If it had more glass beads, then that would have dated him a little bit later. The little bowl is a common type bowl found in the southeastern United States, and like I say, several of those have been found in different sites, and it's filled with some kind of fruit that these little pet parakeets are eating. Here you have hawk feathers, turkey feathers in his arrows, and I've even included an old chestnut stump. Of course, the chestnut stumps, the chestnuts started dying in the early 1900s, 1930s, and 40s. They were hit by blight and just about destroyed. But I wanted to show these Indians with, like I say, the extinct birds and animals that lived here, and I call this again the ancient Carolinians. Okay, I'd like to introduce to our audience Miss Juanita Presley. She's the librarian here in Dade County, Georgia, and we'd like to thank her for being kind enough to allow us to come into the library and look at the artifacts from the Tunacunnhee Mound that are on display here.
We're glad to have you.
Well, we appreciate you letting us come by and visit. I'm going to try to describe what little I know about the artifacts that are on display here in Dade County. And these were kindly returned to Dade County from the University of Georgia, and they said they would return the artifacts if Dade County could provide a permanent, safe place for these to be displayed. So I'll start here on this other end and try to describe what is on display here. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to pass in front of them, but keep in mind that these little artifacts are not always that well preserved, but they're a couple of thousand years old, and they've been buried in a mound with a lot of rocks piled on them, so they're not always in excellent condition. Here we have some little pipes, and these are inverted. I'll turn them over, and you can kind of get an idea of what they would look like. And these are typically Hopewell or Hopewellian type artifacts. A little pipe there, tobacco pipe. I have to be very careful with these. Now here's one that's obviously a little owl or hawk of some type. You can see his wings here, his little head on the end over here, and his tail. The Hopewellian people often carve little effigies on their pipes, and sometimes they would just carve little statues. Here we have another pipe that, and these are made of stone, incidentally, some type of sandstone, and this one is represents a snail. Although you can't tell a lot about it right there, it is a pipe that would represent a snail. I'm going to lay it down very carefully. And I'll close this for you. On the bottom here, we have some of the fragments of the pottery vessels that were found at the Tunacunnhee site. And you can see this is the bottom of a bowl. And again, remember, these are a couple of thousand years old, so they don't always remain in excellent condition and may have been broken when in use. But it has 3 real small tips on the bottom that would prevent this conical shaped pot from tipping over. See, they're little legs. The pottery is obviously some type of cord wrapped. They would wrap a cord around some kind of a paddle and paddle their pottery, and it would give it this texture. I don't know if you can pick that up or not, but I'll turn it there, and maybe you can kind of see the texture in this pottery. This is mostly sand-tempered pottery from the Middle Woodland period. Okay, in this particular display case, we have a large stone celt. Now this is could have been hafted probably through this area. It would have been inserted into a wooden handle of some type, or could have been. It may have been just handheld, but these are pecked from a soft stone. This is some type of green stone, although it don't appear here, green here, but it is considered a green stone. And you can see some pick marks. They would pick out a general shape and then polish them, and you can see it has a sharp blade on one end, and it's kind of rounded on the other end. And this could have been inserted into a wooden handle, just like a hatchet. And this is approximately just a little over 14 inches long, and this is one of the burial associations. I think it was found in a burial in Mound E, I believe. Now, I might not be correct with that. Let me lay this down very carefully. Here you have a clear quartz projectile point. It may have been a part of a blade of a ceremonial knife inserted in a wooden or bone handle, and it was with one of the burials. It's made of clear quartz. Now I'll turn around here, turn my back to you for just a minute. Here is a shell gorget. I'm sorry, a stone gorget. This may have been used as a necklace worn here. Several that were found in this area were all located on the wrist, so it may have been some kind of a bracelet. This is from one of the burials. Right here we have a copper ear pin, and this was like a little copper wheel or copper reel, and it would be inserted into the ear. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong side, holding the wrong hand to show you that, but it's a copper ear ornament. The Hopewell people are, for some reason, used a lot of mica in their ceremonies, and it's found in their burials. Here you have one of the pieces of mica that was recovered from the site, and it's a disc and has some holes drilled through it. And we're not really sure what these would have been used for, but the whole Hopewell people seem to really like mica. Most of these things, like the mica and the copper, are not found in the Dade County, Georgia vicinity, but could have come from over in North Georgia or southeastern Tennessee or southwestern North Carolina. Now this is one of the pan pipes. There was 9 pan pipes found in the site. Let me see if I can get it to where I can explain a little bit better. Evidently now these had different lengths of reeds in them, like our cane, and these canes would be drilled to give a musical note, and the different lengths would give a different note. So this was probably some type of musical instrument. The copper actually hammered around these different reeds, and you can see where the reeds would be inserted into the open part, and then this would be hammered down between the edges of the reeds. And there was as many pan pipes found on the Tunacunnhee site as any mound that's ever been excavated to date. 9 been found at each of 2 other sites. I believe that basically covers the artifacts that we have here.
All right, there you have it. Northwest Georgia. What a wonderful place. What beautiful country. Ken, thank you again for assisting us in this. Hey, can we be invited back to do another one with you? All right.
I've got a lot of sites I can tell about.
Real good. Northwest Georgia, an artist, a man that just enjoys nature itself, a man you're going to see more of, because there's your invitation. And what do you think, folks? Yeah, we're coming back. I know that there are many stories, many things that is the history and our heritage of America. And as I've told you many times, the rocks, the signs, they all speak. They tell us of what happened in yesteryear. So we just say, Northwest Georgia, hey, you were there. We were taken to this chimney in Georgia, and you know, sometimes you search and you look and then you strike gold. By that I mean a golden vase of history, of heritage. And certainly within this chimney, we hit that, inasmuch as it's one of the few places that you can find pure ancient Hebrew in the Americas. I'm going to show you some of the stones. Bear in mind, these stones were cut from a ledge into squares to make a fireplace. Now, this particular fireplace, I might tell you, was being used at the time these pictures were taken. When you would place your hand on it, you could feel the heat, the warmth coming forth from the stone. It is possible that we have a mem here in the ancient tongue, and bear in mind, inasmuch as they've been cut in squares, that there is not a string, as you would have a string of letters, so I'm not going to try to give you a meaning other than what the Hebrew letters themselves mean. And mem means water. Perhaps it's pointing to the mem, pointing to the water. The lichen that had grown in the center of this was out of our reach, and we did not feel privileged to be able to remove anything from the stones, to leave them as they were. So the center, I'm not even going to make a guesstimate, I would say, because certainly that's what it would be. It is possible, of course, that it is a delete, which is to say a D, which is symbol in the ancient Hebrew, which means door. So door to the water, well, we'll let that one pass, and that certainly would be a rough translation. But let's move on, if we may, to the next shot here. This particular shot, I'm not sure whether this is anything that is significant, just unusual. And being in the fireplace, we thought we would call it to your attention. There are patterns in the ogum, but ogum would be a little out of place, in as much as this would be the only thing that a stem line could be called. And I'm sure, I just doubt very seriously that that's what this is. Perhaps on the ledge it had to do with an alignment. And understand, when it's chopped into squares and hauled away and reassembled into a chimney by people later, strictly, you're kind of on your own on this one. So I'm not going to say a great deal more about that one. Who knows? Maybe it was the plans for the very fireplace. No, that wouldn't. It is old, much, much older than that. So let's go on, if we may, to the next frame. I'll leave that one to your own guess there. This is no doubt, this is something that is found in other places. I can think of Davenport, Iowa, to start with. This same figure basically was found there, and it is believed by most scholars that it had to do with Baal worship, but I don't see any BL or anything of that nature around it or on it, and it is so faint that that it would be very difficult to that letter that does look like to the bottom line is a fault in the stone. The actual carving would look more like a 9, which would make it a bet. A bet in ancient Hebrew, that's a B. And B, the letter B in ancient Hebrew simply stands for house or habitation. And we're going to say a temple even, if you would, because it's obvious this is a object, no doubt, of worship. And inasmuch as there is another stone that I feel that was relative to this that we'll see here in a moment, I think you can begin to see that. It is fascinating, absolutely fascinating, to find these ancient markings. Now, let's go on, if we may, to the next stone. Now, here is a fantastic stone. To see what I'm about to show you, there's little doubt that this stone is upside down. Be that as it may, as it's in the fireplace, it doesn't matter. the point I want to make. There is a perfect, I do mean a perfect, ancient Hebrew alif in this. And if we may, I'm going to have, there you go. There you see the alif. It's perfect. And alif, of course, the letter itself, it's the A in the ancient Hebrew. And certainly, if you were to stand this alif upright, you would see it's very familiar to our modern A that we use even in English. But here you have that perfect, it meant ox head, and it looks like an ox head. That's supposed to be the horn. Every of the ancient letters had a meaning, and it means such things as the priesthood, which is instrumental to plant and harvest via teaching and services. And it can mean even I kind of wanted to catch one other thought. Well, let's leave it with teaching. Indicates strength, stability, power, so forth. Now, a triangle, as you will note, that is overall around this. And I believe if we go on to the next slide, probably you'll see me pointing to the bottom of the triangle with the alif in the center. This means door. Door to what? Door to instruction. We could probably read a great deal more than was intended within this, but there you have it. Now what is significant, inasmuch as it has been removed from the bluff or ledge that this was taken from, again, we don't have a string, so we can only state, and it is fantastic, that the ancient Hebrew alphabet found in Georgia is an alphabet that was not used in recent years. Probably you could almost date it by somewhere around 100 BC to certainly no later than a couple of 300 AD. Most likely even would be dated BC. But there you have it, very seldom found in America with this perfection. What a find. I'll guarantee you the ledge that this stone came from, we're very fortunate inasmuch as the man that owns this property today, it's been in his family ever since the Cherokee Nation was removed from this area to the Oklahoma area at this time. So we know a great deal about the area, and certainly I'm going to be on that mountain looking for other signs in ancient Hebrew. May not find anything, but the gentleman knows from which ridge this stone came from. We're certainly going to be there looking in a documentary in the not too distant future. Now, here's an interesting one. We found 2 of these in the chimney, and this, as you're all familiar with from our work along the Rio Grande River Valley, is a tet. Being a T in ancient Hebrew, and it has a very special meaning. It means that shelter is near, and you could make a pointer from this if you wished. There is an indication to the side that probably, if you take the center bar of the tet, it's pointing to a bluff or a ridge that would be very close by. And again, remember that a triangle out of the circle means delete, which is to say a door, and it points to probably shelter in a curve of the stream or bluff, whichever the case may be. Unfortunately, we were unable to go up on the ridge from which these stones came, and we're handicapped, but reading from the stone, that's what we see in this, a tet. Here we have a fantastic symbol, and I want you to take it in real well. You will notice, I'll just use it as we would you would see what looks to be a 4. Look at it very closely. Inside that half circle, I will call it, you will find a 4. And that 4 in ancient Hebrew, and very ancient Hebrew, is what was used as a resh. A resh. And certainly resh can, as you know from past documentaries, it can mean lion even, can mean lion. It means the head or the first or the upper part of the body. Determines mind and knowledge, intelligence, beauty, self. It can mean king, head teacher. Comes from our instructor. So again, with this stone cut out of the overall, makes it very difficult to draw too many conclusions here. But I believe that the writer tried to form a lamed. In other words, the curved, call it a shepherd's staff. Can you see it, that it surrounds the so-called four, which is a resh? It means the staff of instruction, to teach, to learn. All right, here is a fascinating slide, and as much as you have a tet, again, right in the center. Now, a circle alone is an aeon. It means an eye, to look, the all-seeing eye. Notice how many smaller circles you have even within the larger circle. I have no doubt that this stone belonged near the temple or house of worship that was in one of the prior stones that I said no doubt would be found in relation to this. So there you have it. Aeon, look within. Look what you see with a small aeon even with inside the tet, plus to your left the eye. And then again another eye in the circle around this. How fascinating. Again, ancient Hebrew in Georgia. How fascinating when we check the heritage, the great heritage of our people when we discover those things in America. You are there.